Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first in a series of webinars by Journalift. My name is Željko Crnjaković, and welcome to a webinar called Native Advertising Business Opportunity or Trust Violation. In this webinar, we are going to talk about basically native advertising. And its effect on media. Basically, is it a business opportunity, or can it be a trust violation between the media and their audience? And to help me discuss that, I have two wonderful guests for you. So Galina Ognjanov and Natasha Lakovic-Jukanovic, who are joining me. Welcome, ladies. Hi, how are you?
Thank you. Good to see you.
Okay, so before we get into presenting our guests, I just want to talk to you about some technical information in this webinar. So we're talking in English because the audience is, the Balkan Six. So everybody, welcome to our guests from, or viewers from Albania, Bosnia, Macedonia, Slovenia, Serbia, of course, and all other partners who are involved with Journalift. So if you want to ask any questions of our guests, you have the chat in the window next to me. If you experience any technical difficulties, if we freeze at any moment, or you lose voice or like the picture, just refresh the window that you're seeing, or just close the Chrome and open it up again, and it should clear up. We are recording the webinar, so it should be available at some time or someplace once we are done live. But at any point, feel free to ask questions. Our guests would be very happy to answer them. So to get into presenting our guest tonight, so we have Galina Ognjanov, who is a professor of the University of Belgrade, Faculty of Economics. She is also a scientist, a mentor, and a business consultant with an excellent knowledge of media industry. So her specialization is actually media metrics, development of industry standards in media, and supporting media organizations in developing their business capacities. She has worked with Media Association of Serbia, USAID SMS project, and with a lot of well-known organizations from this industry in Serbia. Also joining us is Natasha Lakovic-Jukanovic, who is a head of strategy and business development at tech.eu, and she has spent her career in the crossroads of technology, marketing, and leadership. Tech.eu is the leading source of news from technology in Europe, data analysis, and market intelligence with a focus on startups. Natasha is also a marketing director was a marketing director at domain.me, as well as, and currently is still, a co-founder of digitalizuj.me organization. She is well-versed in media industry, behavioral psychology, and community management, which enables her to help media to test new business models and implement new revenue streams. Now, did I get that right, ladies, or have I missed anything?
That was a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Željko. And just let me say thank you to the organizers of this webinar. I don't want to name them all because there are many, as we all know. But I would also like to say that I'm happy to be here with Natasha and you, and to discuss this very important topic, native advertising, that we will try to see from various perspectives altogether. So thank you very much.
Okay, so you're welcome, and we'll hope we have a very healthy discussion, because Natasha and Galina are basically gonna tell you what is native advertising and its effect on media, but from a little bit of different perspectives. But before we get into the meat of the things, so let's talk about exactly, for everybody who is still not sure, even though I don't think there is such a person in the audience, what is exactly native advertising, and what is its difference from like other forms of advertising, like content marketing, ads, classic advertising, and stuff like that. So Galina, can you just intro us into just the definitions of native advertising?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. And first of all, also one big hello, good afternoon to our audience who I don't see, unfortunately, due to this platform. And I would love to be in position to meet you. And maybe one day we will have chances to meet all together in some real space and chat in a real setting as well. To go to your answer, Željko, well, it's not always easy to differentiate between native and other types of subtle advertising, because native, what it is a subtle type of advertising. Especially if we refer to digital, and we have to refer to digital because native advertising is actually born digital. It is linked to digital media. However, it is very important to say that whatever the form, it is still advertising, meaning that it is paid for by a known marketer, and that the marketers use it to generate profits for themselves. So that is the general characteristic of any type of advertising. But let's try to make at least some distinctions in the named types. And you mentioned content, sponsored content, you mentioned the native, PR texts, which are also very important to mention. First of all, there's a definition of native advertising, and the best definition I found says that it is a type of online advertising that matches the form and function of the platform on which it appears. And it is in that way, it is very subtle, and to put it more straight, it is like hidden. And from this fact that it is hidden, we are trying to make use of. But it is very tricky, and that is something that Natasha and myself will go through in this discussion of today. The sole characteristics, the characteristic which makes this native as an especially attractive to marketers is that it is difficult to be recognized by the viewers. It is very difficult that the viewer understands it is an ad, and that is what makes native advertising. Because it resembles the organic content of the platform. It can be a commercial publisher, it can be a search engine, social media, or anything else. In that sense, I also have to mention that a native advertising is not just straightforward. It is not just one form. We have actually many forms of native advertising. It is a vast category with many other subcategories. Someone says there are 3 main subcategories, but what we say in Serbian, says there are even 6 subcategories of native advertising. However, when I speak about native advertising, I typically focus on what we call endemic in-feed native advertising, which is mostly resembling what we also call PR text. And now I just want to say about this buzzword, PR text. I'm very much against it. I'm very much against using the title and also using it in advertising. PR texts are very similar to endemic in-feed native ads, but they are linked to print media, traditional print media, and they try to resemble editorials in print media. On the other hand, endemic in-feed native ads are also placed as editorial text, resembling editorial text, but on online platforms, on news media platforms. And in that sense, these two are quite similar in the content because they are trying to present the issue in terms of a news and to place it so that it matches the appearance of other news content. But PR texts are linked to print media, traditional, and native ads to the digital media, moreover. Then we also have content marketing, content advertising, which are also very familiar buzzwords, sometimes used interchangeably with native ads, but basically these are in a way different from native ads, how I am defining it right now. And also, again, I just want to stress that here today, I particularly focus on the endemic in-feed native ads, which are what we can think of head titles, which are placed on the news media platforms, news media sites, and actually resembling other editorial contents with a disclaimer used or even not used, but that's against the law in certain areas, in certain regions. However, still publishers and marketers want to make use of the possibility that the readers could not recognize it as a pure ad. And that's what makes it problematic in my point of view. Of course, it can have its benefits. It also has its disadvantages or its drawbacks. But what I want to point out here today, and with this I will finish this part, is that in my view is utmost importance to understand what consumers or readers may think of native ads so that we could all together make judgments on its further use. Particularly in the interest of online media, because we are here today firstly for the online media and their possibilities to develop their businesses and become sustainable. And particularly those who are of small size, local media and media trying to develop their communities. So for them, this would be very important.
Thank you for that, Galina. And what you said so exactly is right, of course. So native advertising is, in its main definition, the type of advertising that matches the type of content that a media has in its online digital form. So it's very difficult to differentiate it from an editorial, as you said, or a news section or something like that. But Natasha, do you have anything to add? And I would just expand this question. So when we say that native advertising is difficult to spot, is it still required or is it not for a native ad, not content marketing, not ad, not a sponsored, not PR text, but a native ad to be in some way marked as a promo? Or marketing or advertising?
Well, for sure. First, there is the law in Serbia, and I think it's all over our countries in Europe for sure, that you have to mark that the content is sponsored. Well, sponsored or paid by or worked in partnership with these different definitions of it, but it has to be prominently shown. I am aware that sometimes it's not shown. Even in my job, I sometimes get offers for tech.eu to publish sponsored content, but without a mark that is sponsored. But it's not just about the law, it's more about the ethics of the media and the relationship with the readers or listeners, but let's call them readers. But from my perspective, what I would say is for my first role as the marketing manager and as a CMO for 12 years in domain.me, the big part of the marketing strategy was content marketing. So it was creation of our own content on the website, but also native advertising a lot. So the US is the market for domain.me, and we did a lot of native advertising in the US. And that's where I actually realized how important for a company to do that, because we all know that nobody of us sees banners anymore. Banners are very intrusive, and we just created some kind of spam filters in our head when we don't see them. So I think that's a good way of how to present your company, because you have to do marketing, you have to promote your company or product, and that's a different way. But if you want to protect your brand also, you have to be very clear about that's native advertising, that you are sponsoring it. And on the other side, now in a different role, being in tech.eu as a head of strategy, it's the first thing what they taught me there is that it's very important for them that we never publish advertorials, or text that somebody else writes, but only our journalists write those texts, and they are always in line with what our readers want and wants to read, because that's the point, right? We are the news. So if you are playing by the rules, and if you are thinking on your audience first that you will never betray their trust, then I think that's a perfect way. On the other side is that there are always companies or even media that don't want to play by the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Galina, I just want to expand that question. So let's talk about media in relation to the advertisers. So how do they find common ground in native advertising, considering that media is trying to preserve the trust? And as you said, so like if we played by the rules, or if they played by the rules, so they are like always trying to maintain that their reporters are writing actually the text, that they're not just publishing something that the advertiser wants to place on them as their own content and sponsored. But who finds who? And like media is looking for revenue. Advertisers are looking for a place to put their content to. Who finds who more? Who seeks out who more? That is one question. And is it all negotiable? So how far do you push the boundaries? And then we'll switch to Galina, what she thinks on this question.
Well, I actually listened to Galina, or read what Galina wrote about that there was a media company, some of the news, I forgot which one, that they had separate elevators for the advertising team and the journalists, so that they would never be in touch and never mix in each other's jobs. Ideally, of course, that's you have to have always keep to your ethics and never talk well about somebody unless you think that they are really good. But in real life, the line is very even not thin, maybe invisible, and it's not connected to native advertising per se. It's just any kind of advertising. Because we all know, and especially know in our own countries, in the Western Balkans, that if a big company doesn't want to be mentioned in a bad way by any of the media, they usually pay for ads. Is that native ads or just ads? That's what happens. And I'm being very realistic here. On the other side, if somebody wants to present their product in the best possible way, non-intrusive, and in a way that they explain how things, how their product, the benefits of their product, I think native advertising is perfect.
Okay, Galina, what do you think?
I just want to agree with Natasha at many points. This is very important what she said. So to answer your question, yes, it is negotiable. That is what I would say, and we can later on see in which ways. But what I wanted also to add to Natasha's first response, maybe for the audience sake, we should also mention advertorials and content marketing and content advertising as separate forms of advertising, which I missed in the first talk. Advertorials are also more linked to traditional print media, and Natasha is on the right side saying that these are produced jointly by marketers and publishers or journalists, while native or content marketing, in the way Natasha presents it today, should be produced by real journalists and in the way Natasha is explaining, so that they should take the interest of their readers in the first sight. And on the other hand, what I would also stress, maybe Natasha didn't stress it, or I didn't hear it that much stressed, the marketers should be very much aware of the fact that the readers should find their interest in reading such text. So it's in their sake as well, not to hide it, but to make it open for the readers to understand that it will bring them an information on something that they could actually buy or consider buying, or it is an ad. It is paid for, and in that sense, it is not as objective as it would be as if it would be an editorial. But still, it is something of their interest, because advertising is also, we have to put it straight, advertising, the traditional form of advertising, so display ads or banners like Natasha says, or what we can see in traditional media, that kind of or type of advertising is also in the interest of consumers, of customers, because it also brings information. And we speak here about bringing information in different forms. Just my point is that marketers should not capitalize on hiding the fact that it is advertising. And my fear is that what they are doing with native is especially that, hiding that it is an ad. And I want to prove here using real research, scientific research, that for both, for publishers and marketers, it is in their interest to make it more clear, make it more visible that it is advertising and not what they would call native, and trying to impose that it is something written by journalists. But they should openly say it is advertising.
Yeah, Željko, just 1 second. I forgot to say it's a partnership. So it can come from one side. Sometimes it comes from me. Sometimes in tech.eu that we have an idea about what to write, and then we present it to a partner. In other negotiating in a way, how would they promote? But sometimes also it comes from there. So it's not a very straight line. It's always changes. It depends on who has a good idea. Sometimes it's just a good brainstorming session that you get ideas about how to write something and what to do. And when I worked for .me, we had actually a very good cooperation with one of the media that posted, well, their target audience were designers. And we from the domain.me side, we were creating content, but it was absolutely not commercial. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a very good and non-intrusive and useful content for them, for their platform, but also for the users.
Okay, fantastic inputs. So, Galina, let's talk about a little bit about negotiations. So you mentioned that. So where is that line that, media should hold in the sense of, okay, we can do this, but we cannot do that. But we still need your money because we need to keep alive. So let's talk about, so what is acceptable in negotiations and how far would you go, or what can somebody expect?
Well, it's very difficult to explain it in this format and not go into theory so deeply. So I will try to put it as simple as possible and focusing on native. But first of all, I have to start from a broader perspective. So media play on what we call media market. And this market is two sides market. On one side, they're selling their content to the readers, to their audiences. And on the other part of that market, they're selling their advertising space to the advertisers. We all know that the bigger money is on this second side, at the side of advertisers. But advertisers are interested in their audiences. So if they lose their audiences, sooner or later, they will be losing their advertisers. And also, it is not in the interest of advertisers to lose that media audience, or that audience starts not to trust to media anymore, because it won't be easy to find them in other places as it would be in the media setting. So they obviously have common interests, and that makes the space for negotiations between media and advertisers. And speaking about native, because native is the main focus of today, again, if native advertising will lead to losing trustworthiness of media outlets, then it won't be in the interest of advertisers as well. So that should make the position of media in that kind of negotiations in between the two. So to explain that it is very important to stick to the rules, to stick to the ethics, but that would be also of the interest of both parties in this negotiations process. We are all aware of rising of digital. Spending is increasing in digital. That's all undoubtable. I have some data for US and comparisons. In the last 4 years, we started with $17 billion in 2016, reaching more than $50 billion in 2020. So obviously, native is interesting for advertisers, and obviously, media can generate revenues from that type of advertising. So that is why they, in a way, accept the offer from the advertisers. But still, they should be aware of some risks connected to this, and the risks are on both sides. I also want to stress this. Natasha mentioned that we all know that banners are intrusive, and we try to not to pay attention on banners. But there are serious scientific research showing that actually when they compare native and display ads, which are banners in fact, it is obvious that native advertising is generating more click-throughs because they perceive it as an editorial. But then once they click through and find it an ad, then they can feel not very well, knowing that they were cheated, deceived, misled, or whatever you want to say, because that is the fact. If they feel deceived, then they will lose their trust in the media. They may even not come back to the media content. And in that sense, this, what Natasha was referring to, is very, very important to create such native ads which would be of the interest of the readers of particular media. So click-throughs are undoubtable. They generate more click-throughs. But what we have on the other side, we have that generating attention. We still have on the side of banners. So it would be a banner to receive more attention than the headline of a native ad. Why? Because banners have more visuals. That's obvious. They have colors, they have images, they have logos, and that is what generates attention. And also, what is very, very important for marketers, this time I'm not speaking about media outlets, but marketers. For them, it is very important that banners, display ads generate better brand recognition. So they would read a native, but not necessarily they will remember the brand that was incorporated in a native text. So it is, again, tricky. What is better, native or display ads? Both have advantages and disadvantages, but the bottom up is that ethics should be looked for, because ethical behavior on both sides, media and marketers, they will gain from their ethical behavior in terms of keeping readers or customers, and for the sake of their brand reputations, both media brand reputation and advertised brand reputation. So there is a big space for negotiating among these two, knowing everything that was mentioned in Natasha's answers and what I'm trying to impose here.
Okay, so Natasha, so let's look at negotiations from a practical point of view and some real life examples in the sense of you having negotiations. And you mentioned that you received some offers about just leaving out the paid promo banner. Yeah. So that was a negotiation also that maybe went badly. So what do you think? Where is that line, and what should you allow and don't allow when negotiating with advertisers?
Well, if we just speak about the roles here, as a journalist or being I'm not a journalist, but working for the media, also what's the interest of a company, which in many ways should be the same. But inside the media, there is also a big you have to separate, and I mentioned this problem already, you have to separate your editorial politics and your marketing, advertising, because it's difficult to do it, because in a way it's like a very actual theme, like similar to separation of church and the state. Not easy, right? But especially for the local media, but I can say also for tech.eu, people don't want to pay for the online ads. Very rarely you have the online media that work and live off the paid subscriptions. It just doesn't work. People don't want to pay for it. And the only way for the media to survive and to make business out of their media is to do advertising. So in choosing from banners and native advertising, it doesn't have to exclude each other, but it definitely brings different perspectives, different numbers. And what Galina said, with those numbers are really good. But when you do display advertising, when you do banners, you have visits, and you have as a company, your ads are seen only while you are paying for it. But when you do native advertising, usually it's about the content that is created and it stays there. So it is seen at the point when it's published, but it also stays there and gets visits later on. Mm-hmm. So it's more connected to the brand building, to the longer connection with the end audience, with readers, with customers. And that's why native advertising you cannot compare, it's apples and pears. It's not the same. You have the visits and the views from the beginning, but it lasts longer. And I think as a somebody who is working for the media, for me it's easier to explain that banners are good when you are promoting like a promotion, or for us it usually calls for applications or something that it's valid for that moment. But if you want to work on your brand and the people connect to your brand, then it has to be a content. And those are the differences. And negotiations are usually based on me explaining them what most of them, of course, already know, but explaining them the benefits of both sides. Sometimes a combination is the best, and sometimes just one side, whatever goal they want to achieve.
Okay, excellent. So we have been talking about media and advertisers as two different sides and negotiating partners, but there is a third side, which is the audience. So where does that leave them? How can they be protected? Or maybe even a better formulation of that sentence is informed properly of what they are reading. So are they believing they are reading an actual editorial, a news, valid something which has come up, or is it the promotional text put out there by the advertiser? Galina, can you take it and then we'll see.
Yeah, first of all, we have to be aware that typical common readers do not know much or anything about native advertising. If you ask them straight, have you heard of native advertising? Just a few percentages would say yes to that question. So typical readers are not aware of that. So they could be deceived and misled, and that is what is very risky, and what regulators and self-regulations try to change, to make them more aware of potential risks for them, and more capable of understanding what is an ad and what is an editorial. Then we also have to distinguish, if we are talking about effects of this particular type of advertising, we should distinguish between those readers who are like media literate, and as I said, not too many readers are actually media literate. But we should also distinguish between those whose attitudes toward advertising in general are good, or whose attitudes toward advertising in general are bad. So if they have negative attitudes toward advertising, once they understand that they were deceived, misled, they would lose even more trust in the media publishers than it would be the case among those who are generally not, their attitudes toward advertising are not very bad. Then we also have to take into consideration the brand reputation itself. It differs, the effects differ between known brands and well-respected brands, and unknown brands, and the brands that are not respected. So it is difficult to discuss from the point of view of the readers, but if we want to put it generally, then yes, there should be protected from the regulators' side, and as Natasha said, it is regulated. It is legally imposed that such texts should be marked. But those marks also, we are all three aware of that. Those marks could be hidden. They exist, but they are hidden. You can use small letters. You can use shades. You can use. You can put it somewhere within the text, not at the beginning of the text. So you can actually create it to look as if it is an editorial and not an ad. And my impression is that. Typically, that marketers prefer. They would think of native advertising, particularly because of that fact that they can hide it is an advertising, wrongly believing that it looks more credible to the readers. However, research shows that credibility, there is no significant difference in credibility between different types of ads. I mean, traditional ads or banners and native ads. That is what research shows, that there is no difference in credibility in between those. So if you ask me, I think that readers should be educated, should be protected by the government, but should also be double protected, firstly from the publishers' sides, to insist that these disclaimers, we call them disclaimers, are not hidden, but on the contrary, explicitly shown, even to the point of including logos and other visuals, because it is also in the interest of both publishers and marketers, because it draws higher attention, and it makes readers their attitudes toward the text itself. Their attitudes would stay good in regard to that text if they are aware at the very first sight that they're clicking the title, they will actually enter into an ad, be it a native ad.
Okay. Natasha, what do you think? So what can we do to more educate or protect or inform the audience as media or media facilitators?
First, I don't think that's such a big deal. I was like, okay, it's a text that you read. It's not that it's something. For me, banner is more intrusive. If I read some text, I will probably see in the first paragraph that it's good or bad, whatever is being sponsored or not. I think if the articles in native advertising are created to be interesting, fun, entertainment, educational, or just informative for the readers, it doesn't really matter if it is an ad or not. On the other side is the ethics of the journalists, of the editor, basically the editor of the media, because it has to be shown that is a sponsored editorial, or however you call it, sponsored post. There are many examples of these entertaining and fun articles that are for, I don't know, BuzzFeed is probably the best example on the global level, but I think all of us just spend time watching those, reading, or just looking at the GIFs that they create because it's fun. And sometimes they are advertorials. Sometimes they are like right to your face, like, buy this is the best. And you read it because it's fun. You're not reading it because it's an advertorial. I read I couldn't find the real example, but Newsnet is doing that in Serbia. They had a couple of really, really good native advertising pieces that were fun to read, equally fun as everything else that they are doing. So if you can do it for your audience as a journalist, of course. Do it for your audience in the same way as you do everything else. And sometimes we are too serious and we take things like this is super important to not to be too advertorial. If you say that it's an ad, why not? It should be. So it is a fine line. You have to find it. But it's also not such a huge deal. I know that there are so many examples in international examples, usually in the US, because most of the native advertising goes there. But in our region, I would say the bloggers are the biggest native advertising users in terms of earning money on it. I'm not sure how often are they honest about they are selling it or not, but their audience knows and they stay there. And the real journalists are kind of shocked with how things go, which I understand because our values are very important, and all of these media that I work with as a part of Thomson Foundation are very much about ethics and their values, and they have the highest form of respect for that. But for the fun things, you can do advertorials, you can do these entertaining articles, and that's okay.
Okay. Yeah. So I think the main point of native advertising, which we can all agree on, is it is a fine line. But if you maintain the truth of what you believe to be true about the advertiser that you're getting into the agreement with, and if you write it within your own words, then you're kind of like doing, whether it's an editorial or a sponsored post, you're doing everybody a favor. So, but let's proceed and talk about how to keep a sustainable revenue model of native advertising. We talked about like banners are still out there and ads are still out there, and Lena said, and I totally agree. So they grab much more attention. On the other hand, you have that trend of everybody having ad blockers and, being just bombarded with too much information on a daily basis that we don't even see the ads. They just run past us. But native has become a form of advertising, which, like, if we are at all interested in what that media is writing about, there is maybe a better chance of, as even the statistics have shown, to be a better click-through rate, and then I read something interesting and still be. So native is a very important business revenue stream model in that sense. So how can media keep it or seek it out? So I want to get back to that and talk about it as a revenue model. So is everything for sale? Glina, you can start.
in a way, to some parts I agree with what Natasha has said, and to some other parts I can't agree. What I want to say, Natasha says it's not a matter of it is an advertising or not, provided that the content is interesting and entertaining for readers. And with that, I can agree.
That's from the reader's perspective.
Yeah, true. With that, I do agree. But what makes difference is if they know if it is an advertising or they do not know if it is an advertising. And that is where I don't agree to at least not fully agree with you, because they, in my opinion, they simply have to be aware of reading an ad or reading an editorial. Because if we can say the line is thin, but the line exists and must exist, and we mustn't break it, because it will harm in the long run both professions, and I'm very much afraid that it will particularly harm publishers. And also, broadly speaking, the trustworthiness of readers into everything they are presenting, not only advertising, but the news, the real news, something which is important for all of us. So that is what we have to protect, and that is my point here. Again, it is obvious that advertising money is an important part of revenues, that business models to bigger or lesser percentage depend on it. Media really depend on selling their advertising space. So to try to answer if everything is on sales, media space is on sales, but media reputation is not on sales, and they have to be very careful in that sense. And this is again what I see that Natasha and me we have agreed about, that there is space for negotiating in between. So media just shouldn't skip this barrier. They shouldn't step beyond that line. They have to protect their readers, because their selling of advertising space is based on their capital, and their capital are their readers. That is what I want to stress here. That is the most important.
Okay. Natasha, any thoughts on this?
Well, I just was thinking about you are as a media, you post a text that is paid for, like a sponsored text, being written by you or by a company. If it's not read, then you didn't do a good job for anybody. And that's the problem, because companies want the articles that they pay for to be read. And if you want them to be read, they have to be in line with what your audience expects from you. So the line is there. Mm-hmm. And it's probably difficult to find it at the beginning, but at certain point when you find it, it's just very easy to stick to it, because the readers are the most important part, even though they don't bring the money.
And maybe to put it as simple as possible, the quality of content. What Natasha is referring here, that's the quality of content. If the content itself is good and is addressing the need of media's audience, like entertainment or information, and that is what I also said in my speech today. Advertising is not necessarily bad. I don't believe it's bad. On contrary, I believe it is important, because advertising sends information, which is important to all of us at certain point of time. So it is a matter of incorporating this content well into the content of media, and for the sake of the audience. And be it native, sponsored content, whatever, display ad, they will know to make use of it if they need it. So the quality of content is important. And of course, ethics and legal obligations that need to be abided by.
That's it, of course.
Yeah.
You know, ladies, I had a kind of a final question. So what are the best steps to implement native advertising? And you told everything in your last two answers. So this is kind of a wrap up of native advertising, but I do have one last question for you. But before we get into it, so I'm just reminding everybody from our viewers. So if you want to ask a question, feel free to do so in the chat. We do have a comment. Vladimira is saying hello to everybody. She loves content or native advertising, sorry, but with a disclaimer and ethics and everything that goes along into ethical journalism. And a big shout out to everybody there. So please feel free to ask questions before we finish the last question. So the last question for you is, we talked about native advertising. We talked about, and it's here to stay. Basically, it's been around for a while with digital, even more so, or even expressly so. Is it in danger of being like changed with a new form of advertising? What are you seeing? So what is the next step? Is like native the biggest threat to trust violation, or is anything else out there happening in the future? Let's start with Natasha.
I think the biggest threat to native advertising is that people start paying for content.
Ooh,
and then
okay.
and then the media just doesn't have to do advertising, and that's basically super nice. Because that's a steady income.
Netflix mode, yeah.
Exactly, and then everything is fine and everybody is happy, except the companies, but they will always find a way. I think the companies, especially those with big budgets, always find a way to make something. I always remember Podravka and Kuharica. Is that the website that they have?
Yeah, I think.
So it's their website. They made it years ago when nobody knew what's native advertising. So the companies that have a budget will always find a way. Is that your own website that is kind of masked behind something else? Or is it paying for content, or just doing some partnering research or something? Research is always also a very big deal of the companies with big budgets, to do research and then publish the numbers from the research that everybody wants to write about. It's not really native advertising because they don't pay to the media for that. But I think marketing and advertising is very creative. Something new will always pop up. Whatever happens with native, or I think native will just develop to be more interesting and easier to digest for everybody.
Okay, thank you for that. Galina, what do you think?
I agree with Natasha. I don't see it disappearing, native, but I must confess I'm not apocalyptic. I don't believe that anything that used to be on before disappears. I think that it all stays, integrating with the new forms. Maybe percentages are changing. So we say that print, for example, accounts for a lesser percentage in the total media budget, but still the amounts are increasing. So marketers are paying more and more, and unfortunately consumers are paying more and more, because it always transfers to prices, because we pay for that advertising, wanting or not. As consumers, we pay for the information we are receiving through various forms of advertising. Yes, that's true that paid for content would lessen native, but I'm not that optimistic that people will start paying for content.
I'm just paying.
Yeah. So there is no fear for native advertising. Something will appear, but native will stay. Banners, I can see Natasha is against banners, but I don't see them disappearing.
I'm not against.
Yeah.
They have their own role, but it's important to understand the role.
Yeah. So everything stays, and native will stay.
We actually have two questions. So you see, we moved the audience so a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that laws regulate sponsored content in Serbia. Which laws, and do they also include online media? In Bosnia and Herzegovina, there is no regulation for online media, but only for radio and TV. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, we have this new law on advertising, which is mainly focusing on traditional media, so that's true. But on the other hand, the native advertising, sponsored content on news media in Serbia is presented with disclaimers. So in that sense, there is no problem. You can find it either as PR texts or disclaimers, or PR texts or sponsored or promotions. So in that sense, be it the law or self-regulation, there are no violations to that in that matter in Serbia. But again, we have to differentiate in between different levels of appearing of disclaimers. This is the lowest level, when actually the disclaimer is hidden itself. And what I was trying to explain through my talk today, I'm not sure I managed that, but what I was trying to explain that the research shows that it is better to present it more openly, not just insert sponsored text, but to make it more visual, to make it more obvious to the readers. So it would be sponsored with bigger letters, letters in different color, and even with the logo of the brand, which would be incorporated in the text, in the content that is posted on news media. Why? Because it generates attention. Generating attention provides more click-throughs. And in the first point, the potential readers would know that it would be a promotion of a brand, and they would later on better recall of the brand. On the other hand, if it is hidden, for example, that is how I react to this. Of course, I teach this, I do research in this, so I'm not a typical reader, and maybe my attitudes and my behavior toward it is not typical. But sometimes I'm also cheeked in a way that I see a headline on the topic I'm interested in, and I click through, I read through the text, and in the final segment, I find that they're selling some supplements. And at that very point, I'm really angry. Believe me, I'm really angry, to the point that I don't want to come back to the same platform, and I don't want to go to buy that print version of the same online media if it exists. Or I would stop paying donations, or I would stop being a member of the club if I see that they're using it in the way they shouldn't do it. The other thing is what Natasha is talking about, that is quality of content. When I received both information, entertainment, and I received what I actually wanted to see at the very beginning. And that is the different advertising or not. If I want to see the ad, if I'm interested in what it is advertised, then fine, I will be happy to see it. But if I want just to read an objective story of a journalist and it is a selling story, I would be very angry. That is,
I have another question, which is kind of leans directly into what you were just saying. So in the post-truth time, when the fake news is omnipresent, and aren't we naive if we expect readers to be able to distinguish what is news and what is native articles? And should this be more strictly regulated? So, not sure, what do you think? Are the laws strict enough in the sense of plain enough?
I'm not sure how the laws are in the Western Balkans regarding that. And I knew for the US, 5 years ago, it was very strict. It had to be, even when you put it on social media, when you share an article on social media, you have to say that it's sponsored. There has to be a hashtag ads or sponsored. So in the US, it was quite clear. I think it should be very clear. But as somebody who worked both as for the company and now for the media, I think it's of essence that you you always want to show that it is sponsored, because you don't want your customers to feel cheated, like Galina said. I also have the same experience. I read of course, in a different way as a But when I read through the article and when I see in the end that it's sponsored, I really think it's not. I don't feel good. But I also read when it starts with it. I can't say that you can always see. There are people who they don't see that part sponsored by, like you don't see a banner. So I think what was the Times? Or the New York Times, they have a very shady way of showing the sponsored ad. So when you open the link, you don't see it, but when you go down or up, then you see it. And it shows at the upper left corner. And it's known that the upper left corner is not a place because people don't see that. It has to be on the right side. That's the place where people look at. So it's a play always with UX designers, and even though the text is good, there is an article about House of Cards that they did as a native advertising, and it's just I didn't feel well when I read. It's a good article, but when I came to the end, I saw the sponsored part. I can send the link actually here, so if people want to see it.
You can send it in chat. So while you do that, so Galina, how do you see the pace of native advertising in developing countries? So we're assuming in the Western Balkans. So is it the same, like the pace of the use and development and media using native advertising? As Natasha said, it's very strictly regulated and widely used in the US. How is it here?
Well, we are maybe not that much developed in terms of the amounts of budgets. So that is our in that sense we are smaller. But in the sense of development of creativity and following what is novel ideas on Western markets, we are very close, maybe even leaders in certain aspects. So native advertising is growing in Serbia. Digital is accounting for higher percentages by year to year. In Serbia, I don't have data for the whole of the region, I'm sorry, but in Serbia it is very much used and it is growing. And in terms of quality, creativity, it is also quite comparable to what we have in more developed markets. But of course, our readers are not maybe that much educated. But with that, I don't want to say that they are too educated. They also are not very much educated. But maybe they started talking about this sooner, and maybe they have more information coming from regulators than in Serbia and the region. That is the only difference. So in that sense, regulations of the whole area, we are maybe late for a couple of years, but it's nothing to be particularly worried about.
Well, I can say that Croatia is quite active, and they have a couple of really good examples of native advertising. So I'm sure it came. We also already have it in Serbia. We do have in Montenegro also some of the educational articles that are also coming from domain.me and are published in the local news. There is something, it's just more work, and I think the media, the journalists don't have enough time to work on that, but it's also a matter of priorities.
Okay.
And just one more thing, Jacob, because I forgot to mention it. From Natasha's talk or one of your questions, I remember that issue, and that issue is how to measure. We speak about click-throughs, which is connected to certain forms of native ads. Now we are speaking today here about one specific form of native ad. But since our audience is coming from local media, that would be of particular interest to them in negotiations toward marketers, how to measure it, and whether to accept only click-through rates or they should use what they call brand lists or other kinds of measures, and how to present their audiences. It's not a matter of being big in terms of huge audience that you're covering, but it's a matter of having audience that could not be reached through other media. So that is something that they should have in mind when selling their advertising space to whatever form. Yeah.
I just think it's just a matter of how many people visit or read the text and the average time spent on the text. That's something that is used. It's not just about clicks, because the native advertising is not really for that. That's not the purpose of it. That would be advertorial.
Yeah.
It's more about brand building, which is very difficult to measure, but that's also could be shown in the number of reads or visits to the page and the time spent on the page.
Okay, very good points and very good advice at the end. We have come at the end to the end of the webinar. Natasha, Galina, thank you very much for your inputs and your knowledge and your expertise. We see by the questions that and the comments that our viewers have liked it, and I just want to thank you so much for giving up your time and knowledge for us.
Thank you all. I gave some examples that I found were kind of cute.
Okay,
cool.
Some
entertaining and educational, but I think it's good. Okay,
cool.
Thank you all.
For everybody else, this is the end of the webinar. We hope you enjoyed it, and keep a lookout. There will be another series of webinars by Journalift. Until then, see you next time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.